Divrei Torah tonight. I want to thank our very own Barry Solomon sponsoring a memory of his dear and beloved grandfather Julius Sefer Pinchas Ben Yosef Olav Shalom Bigashkar Chaber, who is such a vital chelik in all the shiurim, all the videos, and so much more. Tizka Lemitzvus, the Heilig Neshama of the Zaidi should be zoichet to an Aliyah and Neshama Gan Eden Shamayla Mechayil Lachayil La'ilu Leila Met Hashem. I want to mention as well, sponsors going back to December 10th, also sponsoring L'Chod Zion Teves, Barbara and Erwin Benjamin, sponsoring in memory of their respective mothers. Yet the Shloshatz, yet the Bashmuel Moshe Leha Shalom, that's your side on Vav Teves. Frida Benjamin, Frida Bas, Yitzchak Kila, Leah Shalom, that's Zion Tevis. Once again, the Heilig Neshama should be zocheh to a tremendous aliyah and Hashem and Gan Eden Shamayim Mechayil Lachayil Lamet Hashem. I mentioned as well the yortzites of Pinchas Ben Yosef, Meir Aryeh Ben Menachem David, Aleim Shalom. Want to thank the Solomon and Goldberg Mishpachas and the Met Hashem only Simcha and Besuras Tavis and all the aforementioned Mishpachas and all of Klal Yisrael and Met Hashem. Amen. You ask the average person, what's the most famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, and perhaps the first Mishnah that comes to somebody's mind. People will tell you, what do you mean? Pirkei Avos naturally begins a series of three, Al Shlosha Dvarim Olam Omed Al Torah, the Al Avodah Al Gemilas Chasodim. That, of course, is not Perk Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. After delineating, outlining the Messiah in brief, the Rambam, of course, is Marich and his Agdama to the Ad when he delineates for us the Mem Doris, the 40 generations from Moshe Rabbeinu, Makabel, the Torah at Sinai, all the way until the Chasimas and Talmud, Ayadei, Ravina, and Ravashi. We have it at Kitz and Nimratz at the outset of Pirkei Avos, Moshe Kibbutz, Torah Messinai, Mesor Yeshua V'chulei, famous Bar Tanura. This really belongs at the beginning of every single, or at least at the beginning of Shas Mishnah. Is what's it doing in Avos, right? It's the famous Bar Tanura because Kasaka Daitoch, that hey, like Ravel Yolopian said, the Goyim, they have Dale Carnegie. How to win friends and influence people. They got their Dale Carnegies, they got their Wayne Dyers, they got their Tony Robbins, they got their Bali Musar as well. Lahavdil Alfei Abdullahs, our Musar, our moral and ethical codes. They're not made up. It's not Bodu Milibam. Shochok me Chazal Fakert. It's part and parcel of the Messiah to tell me that the Dine Brachos Shabbos Avram Soch Mechulei, that's moved from Elav. That's axiomatic. That's given to us from Moshe Rabbeinu and Sinai. But you might think when you go through the pages of Pirkei Avos that all these noble attributes and all the positive traits and the pursuits of what defines a yid, moral and ethical compass of life. This is the guidebook. You might think it came stamazoi from their minds. No, it's all a chelik, part and parcel of the Messiah Moshe Kibbutz or Messinai. So we go through the Messiah, we understand Pirkei Avos has to begin with the Messiah. And then you would think the next Mishnah should be what? What does the Torah rest upon? The three-legged tripod upholding the world is one consisting of these three pivotal, crucial legs of Torah. Avodah Gemilas Hasodim, that's not Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. That, of course, is what's recited, what's said over by Shimon HaTzadik, who is Mishiyore Knesset HaGedolah. He's of the remnant of the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. Hu HaYomer, Hu Haya K'moshe HaYomer. He's the one, when we get to the second Mishnah, to tell us Al Shoshet Farm Olam Omed, Al Torah, V'Al Avodah, V'Al Gemilas Chasodim. That's what the world rests upon. If we're going to go in chronological order, it ought to follow the sequence chronologically of the Avos HaKadoshim, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, based on the Zohar Chodesh and Chukas, Peidalam and Alf, the Maral here, and Der Chaim, the Vilna Gaon, the Talmidav, and the respective commentaries of Pirkei Avos. The Omen HaTorah, of course, is Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov is Tam Yosef Olim. Avram Avinu is Titei Nemes LiYaakov, Chesed LiAvram. Writes the Pasuk, the Enemicha, and the Troyes Upper Exayin Pasuk Chav. He is connected the Omen of Chesed, Gemilas Chasodim, and Yitzchak naturally is the Omen HaVodah. He is connected Din, he is connected Avodah. He is a Korban Pshuto K'mashmo Akedas Yitzchak. That is the one who gave us Vayetze Yitzchak Lasuach Basadeh Brachos Chavav. He didn't just give us Talmud Tefillah, he gave us Mincha, an offering, not simply Shachars corresponding to the Shachar, Arvas corresponding to the Erev. He is a Mincha Pshuto K'mashmo. He's an Akedas Yitzchak. He is Din, he's Avodah. So the Seder Hadvarim ought to have been Gemilas Chasadim Avodah, then Torah. And no, right, Rav Chanan and Kovetz Malmorim, it all begins with Torah. Torah is the most important. Torah, avodim lesasadim, as Chaim Voloshin writes, the world can go 1 second without tefillah, without avodah, and likewise 1 second without chesed. The world cannot exist 1 second without Torah. That is the ikar leg holding up the world, and thus the sequence is, therefore, al Torah keneged Yaakov, al avodah keneged Yitzchak, finally al gemilas chasadim. Rabbi Yonah and many other Rishonim tell us when we fast forward to the end of the first parak, we find that al shlosh dvarim ha'olam omeid, al adin v'al emes v'al shalom. What's going on here? Rabbi Yonah, how the world was built upon its resting on the three-legged tripod of Torah, avodah, gemilas chasadim. What's perpetuating the world? The manifestations thereof, as the Maral and others explain. Din keneged avoda, emes keneged Torah, shalom keneged gemilas chasadim. These are the three manifestations of the three categories outlined for us at Pirkei Mishnah Beis. The daily manifestation of those aspects, that's what's perpetuating, what's keeping the world going. So let's then ask, so the order should have been al emes keneged Torah, then din keneged avoda, and then shalom keneged gemilas chasadim. No, the world is resting the Feiner first and foremost on Torah, because if there hadn't been Torah, there's nothing to write home about. It's got to begin and end with Torah Kedosha. Ezra Avram Mishal writes as well, even practically speaking, how do you know when to daven, how to do chesed, when to do chesed, for whom to do chesed? All of those dinim are outlined by the Torah, so it's got to begin with the Torah. But what's keeping the world going? Din. Without din, there's nothing to talk about. That's why you can have the Zayim Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, as the Maral says, even the Goyim have to set up a judicial system, a legislative body. Without din, the society crumbles internally. So you got to have din. You want to keep the world going, practically speaking, to perpetuate the olam, it's got to be din first and foremost, and that's what the Goyim have. They don't have Torah b'chlal, and then it gets to emes keneged Torah, and then you have shalom keneged gemilas chasadim. So I can understand the Seid HaDvarim. I understand we begin the first parak, Torah avodah gemilas chasadim, we end the parak with din, emes, and shalom, the three corresponding to the three. Everything is geschmack, or is it? Why didn't I start with Torah avodah gemilas chasadim? It's not what I started with. That's Shimon HaTzadik's directive, who is Mishiori Knesset HaGedolah. He is left over from Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, and he's telling us, okay, you know what, Rabbi Sai, we're starting to rebuild the world anew. Let's understand what are the three pillars upholding the world. Torah number 1, Avodah number 2, Gemilas Chasadim number 3. As the Maral says repeatedly throughout his Derech Chaim commentary, there are three in Yonei Shleimus. The Shleimus Beinodom La'atzmo, Beino Levein Kono, between you and your Creator, and Beino Levein Chavero. And that's why we have all these ideas of three, and that is exactly what's brought about by these three respective Amudim. A person can only get the Shleimus independently. Beino Levein Atzmo, Ayadei Kedusha Satayra Liman Atayra. That's Torah. Avodah is the relationship between you and the Bari Olam. Adam Beino Levein Kono. And Gemilas Chasadim Shalom, that's between you, Adam Bein Chavero. And thus we have the three in Yonei Shleimus, highlighted by the three Amodei Olam. Everything is Geshmak. You got the bookends, the Pirkei Avos, Perek Rishon, Aleph to the end, Geshmak. Except we didn't begin with that. After we had the Messiah, which the Bar Tanur explained to us. Before we get to even the knowledge of what the world is resting upon, why talk about those who are left over from Anshe Knesset HaGedolah? Let's go to the leaders of the great assembly themselves. So Rabbi said, before we get to the Shiorei Knesset HaGedolah, here you have the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, you have Nevi'im, the last of the Nevi'im. Before we get to the new stage, the new phase of existence, let's talk about these 120 leaders of the Great Assembly. Now, they had thousands of things to say, millions of things to say. Even the individuals, who Omer, each individual, B'derech Klal, had three things to say. Anshe Knesset as a collective body, they're giving you one united front, one statement expressed by the body as a whole. And that is what? Let's go to the end of the first Mishnah. That means not a separate Mishnah. It's part and parcel of the Messiah. There's nothing to talk about. Moshe Kibbutz Sitzol Gavaldik. But what? It's got to come down to the following. They gave over the Torah to Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. We're not going to break from Mishnah Beis and tell you what Anshe Knesset HaGedolah here to say. Already mixed in, swallowed, absorbed into Mishnah Aleph. You should know the Torah was given from Moshe, making its way to Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. So Rabbi said, before we depart from the opening Mishnah of the moral and ethical compass of life, what do we need to know? We need to know three essential things. Hey Mamru, these leaders of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, hey Mamru, they said the following shlosh dvarim. They had so much to say. This is what we need to know at the very outset of Pirkei Avos. So what do you think is the first message? Well, if we're following the model of Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasadim, then after the first should have been Hamidu Talmidim Harbe. Then maybe also siyag l'Torah, keep Hashem's Torah, but you have to be mami, you have to spread Torah. And the Maharal talks about Yediyas HaTorah, and then have a Masunim Adin, Keneged Avoda, put that maybe number 2. You know what the first message is? And the classical work of morals and ethics of Klal Yisrael, that came to us as part and parcel of the cherished Halud Messiah from Sinai. The very first statement, the very first directive on the page of Pirkei Avos is, have a Masunim Adin. Even though I'm going to talk about Torah as the number 1, I'm not going to start with Hamidu Talmidim Harbe. I'm going to perhaps suggest also Siyag l'Torah. Maybe that's the one Keneged Torah. We don't begin with that. Those are numbers 2 and 3 respectively. The very first mention is what? Is Hevim Masunim Adin, which does parallel the last submission in the first parak, which is that what's keeping the world going? The Din Emes and Shalom. So Keneged the Din, I have Hevim Masunim Adin. But I think there's more at play. There's so much to teach us, so much to give over to us. And yet the very first message, the very first, the most important directive to know when you open up its pages is, have a Masunim Adin. Be slow, be patient when it comes to judgment. Yes, the Maharal points out it's clearly a directive primarily geared towards the Dayanim, but lav davka Dayanim, it's everybody. Don't rush to judge HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'kav chayv. Have a Masunim Adin, take your time. Don't rush to judge anybody l'kav chayv. Take your time. Don't rush to make judgments. Have a Masunim Adin. Slow down, mesinus, patience. Be calm, be mindful, think things through well, carefully. With Zahiras, have a Masunim Adin. That's the opening directive. Where were they coming from? This is the most important thing. This is the way to start. Not even as the commencement of an independent Mishnah, but as the Siyum de Milsa of the very Messiah Satira. We can't finish speaking about the Messiah until you know these 3 things. Well, then I understand. Without Hamidu Talmidim Harbe, you can't perpetuate Torah and Klal Yisrael. So that's more of Elov. I'm giving a Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu and ultimately Nachshon his Gedolah. If you're not going to be Ma'im Talmidim, then there's nothing to talk about. So I understand why that's opening right here in my first Mishnah. Without a Messiah, without transmitting it to the next generation and setting up other Talmidim, you're not going to perpetuate Torah. That's why the Tkufa of Torah begins with who? Right? So Moshe Feinstein and Rosh Moshe, Parshas, Lech Lecha, right? So Moshe and the Vidas, Vasifas and Drush Beis, right? So Menachem Tzvi and Zach, so Menachem Tzvi and Ramesh Shapiro, Milabulin said the same shtickle Torah. The Tkufa of Torah doesn't begin when Adam is learning Torah, when Noach is learning Torah, not even with the Beis Medrash of Shem and Aver, not even Mr. Shelach. When does the Tkufa of Torah begin? Twice in Shas of the Zohar, Testament, also and Enter inside Isaiah and Aleph. Tkufa's Torah begins with Avram Avinu when what? Not when he's 3, 40, 48, or 50, 4 Shitas in the Midrashim. When he was Makir as Baro, it's only when he started to teach Torah, to be Mamid Talmidim, starting to transmit Torah. That's when he perpetuated Torah. That's when the year of Torah begins. I understand that belongs to my first mission. You want to talk about a Messiah? A Messiah is nothing unless you're Mamid Talmidim to continue the Messiah. Also Siyag l'Torah. That's also fundamental. It's Mamish Yisodi. If I don't make a Siyag the Torah, if I don't safeguard the Torah, then I'm going to lose the Torah. If you don't make a Zeris, then you're going to lose the Assays. You're going to lose the Los Assays. I understand that is the way to perpetuate the Kiyum Torah. You got to make safeguards. But have a Masunim Adin. What's it doing in the first mission? Why is that the first statement out of their mouths? Hey, Mama, have a Masunim. Where are they coming from? Now we know the Gra holds that everything throughout Shas, Mishnah, is Gemara, it all has its roots in Tanakh. They say the Gra spent the last 10 years of his life just learning Tanakh. What was he just learning Tanakh? After he knew Kol Torah Kula, Baal Peh in his fingertips, Kisvei Meluchi Becha, spent the years of his last years of his life just going through a Tanakh and showing the same way Rabbi Akiva, Menachas Chavtesem Reis was Dorish Tila Tilam Shalalachas from all the little kutzim, all the little tagin on the Torah. He was going back to Torah Shvachsav and showing you how all of Torah Shvachpeh comes from Torah Shvachsav. Feiner is daiti. I didn't see anyone who says this, but I think that where they were coming from is the answer is in our parsha. Where in the world is the Rabbi going with this? All the Pirkei Avos are now with 14 minutes remaining. Okay, about 40 seconds remaining. Feiner is daiti. It's this week's parsha. Yaakov Avinu gathers the children together. Vayikra Yaakov Abana Vayomer Yasva Gidul Lachem Eisa Shayikra Eschem Achor Seyamim. This is not just brachos for his children. This is the story of Klal Yisrael. And how do we begin? lines him up. Even though, remember, Reuven, technically he lost his birthright. The Gemara in Brachos Daf Zayin and Reish is really taken away from him, given to Yosef. Reuven, Ma bein b'ni lebein chami. Yosef really got the birthright, and that's what Rashi says when we start with Reuven. Bechoriata, you are the Bechor. Koichi v'reish asayni. And yet what? Yaakov Avinu is telling Reuven right at the outset of the Brachos that are applicable not only to Reuven but to the entirety of his Shevet, to Klal Yisrael. These are messages for Klal Yisrael, and that's why the Bali must have pointed out everybody had to be gathered. Why? Usually when you give brachos, you have each one-on-one. No, everyone's got to be present because these are messages for everybody to hear. So what does Rashi tell us? You are my Bechor. You're the Tipur Rishoina. You are the Bechor. You should have had the Bechor. You should have had Kahuna. You should have had Malchus. Yesos b'Malchus. You should have everything. Semi Garam Lekach Lahapsid Kalela. You lost your birthright. You lost Malchus. You lost Kahuna. Why did it all happen? Because of one event. What was the one event? Pachas Kamayim Al Taisar Kelisa Mishkavei Avicha As Chilalta Yitzu. What did he do? He mixed up the beds. After the tragic premature demise of Rachel Amena, what did Reuven do? Not to be mevazeh the covet of Rachel Chalila, but to give covet to Leah. He did l'shem shamayim. How could I have Reuven? How could I have Yaakov, my tati, take his bed? I'm moving into the tent, the bill of the shivcha of Rachel. I have to move it into the tent. Reuven, what? You're making cheshbainis of Yaakovina, the Bechir Shemavos? You're acting the Shem Shemayim, but what are you doing? Pachas Kamayim Al Taisar. You're like the rushing thrust of the water. You're just impetuous. The impetuosity. What's the first message? This is Yaakov the Bechir Shemavos, Yisrael Saba. And what's the first message? Not just to Reuven, but through Reuven to all of Klal Yisrael. You want to be a leader. What do we have? Bati Kuna, Bati Malchus, Bati everything. The Bechor. Yaakov got the Bechor. He understood the magnitude of what Bechor is all about. Reuven had it. He had it all. He had the first birthright. He had Kahuna. He had Malchus and one Maisa. And this is after he did tshuva. Remember, he did tshuva. When he went to save Yosef, what was that a tikkun for? Everybody said, let's rush to kill Yosef. Reuven says, hold on, everybody slow down. Zok the Sforno. Oh, for note, he was Monea, the Pole Apitomi. It says, act impetuously, act right away. Reuven was goofa masaking that Zok the Sforno. He was masaking his own cheta pakas kamayim. And he held back and said, Rabbi Sai, let's be b'mesinos. Don't rush to judge Yosef. Let's be Masunim Adin. He was ready to carry him back. And the other day he did tshuva and he was masaking him. But what? Doesn't make a difference. He can never be a leader again. You can do tshuva and you'll be right here on the list and you'll get the first bracha. But you can never be a leader. Why? Because you can't be the leader of Bechor, of birthright, of Kahuna, of Malchus, of anything important if you're impetuous. If you're Pachas Kamayim Al Taisar. If you run right away, you run to judge people. My tati's making a mistake. How could he take his bed and place the bed in the tent of Bilhah? How could he do that? I'm going to make a decision for him. I'm going to rush to act in honor and defense of the respect of my mother Leah. And I'm going to be Mababel the Mitas. You can't do that, Reuven. Why? Because you want to be a leader. The first message you need to know in Klal Yisrael, the first message in the Brachos is the antithesis. He lost it all because Bakas Kamayim Al Taisar. If you want to get Kahuna and you want to get Malchus, you know what the ticket is? The very first thing is the tikkun of Pachas Kamayim Al Taisar. You want to be a leader, you want to be somebody in life, the first thing you need to know is, Bodhi, slow down. Don't rush to judge a Kadosh Baruch Hu l'kav chayv. Don't rush to judge a person l'kav chayv. Don't rush to judge your friend l'kav chayv. When you're doing a ma'aseh mitzvah, don't slow down. Zok the Panovich Arav. When the Rosh writes in Orchas Chaim, Al tavah el ma'asecha. What do you mean? Zoriz makdim el mitzvahs. Yes, a Zoriz is makdim to get to a mitzvah, as explains the Panovich Arav in the Orchas Chaim, a Rosh HaMavur. Zok the Panovich Arav. But when you start the ma'aseh, you do it slowly, b'mesinas, with mindfulness, with concentration, with respect for the Maisa on hand. So a Zoriz, those who are filled with zeal and alacrity, they're magdiman to get to a Maisa mitzvah. They're running and always on the lookout for mitzvah opportunities. But once you get there, slow down. Reuven, big things are going on. Your father's the Bechir Shemavos. What are you doing? You're making a decision for him where his bed belongs. Slow down. Have a Masuna Badin is the antithesis of Fianiastaiti of Pachas Kamayim Al Taisan Shaginas Gadola Eina Chanami. They're looking to the Torah as the guidebook. Yaakov Avinu is giving the brachos, is giving lessons essence for Klal Yisrael, Dorei Doros. And the first message is not heard exclusively as a Musa Shus for Ruvain. Hey, I want everybody, all the Shvatim, to hear all the messages. Rabbi say, the first message in Vayechi to not just Ruvain, but to all the Shvatim is the worst Midah that's going to be Gairim. Everything else is Pachas Kamayim Al Toisar. Stop rushing like the water. Slow down. Don't judge your Rabbonim l'kav chayv, your Dayanim l'kav chayv. Don't judge your Chaverim l'kav chayv. Slow down, be down l'kav schus. Analyze things with mindfulness, with zehirus, with a mesidus, have a mesunim adin when it comes to any judgment. That is, had Ruvain been Mekayim have a mesunim adin, he would be the Bechor out of Yom Hazeh. He would have the Kahuna, he would have Malchus, he would have everything. And he lost it. So Mamela come out and said, oh, wait a second. They got it all. They're the guiding people of Klal Yisrael. They are the Malachim right now. They're guiding Klal Yisrael. They are it. They got it. They're at the top. How did they get there? Hey, Mamar Shlosh Dvarim. I'll tell you how we got here. You know why? Because we started number one with what the Tikkun of Pachas Kamayim Al Toisar. We live our lives of what? Before we think about being Mama Talmidim, before we think about Siyag L'Torah, they're making Siyagim through and through. They're telling you the first statement out of our mouths, and the one you need to know first and foremost, the very first directive on the Heilig pages of God's Pirkei Avos is have a mesunim adin. That is zelu mazeh. The tikkun of Pachas Kamayim Al Taisar. Have a mesunim. Slow down. That's how we got where we are today. That's Anshe Knesses Hakadoila. Have a mesunim adin. That's the tikkun of Ruvain's Pachas Kamayim Al Taisar, and that's what leads to Galus. Have a gavaldig gavach up ahead.